Hey, how's it going everyone? This is Leon from Studio Vision, and today we are going over the paper maker. Now, essentially what the paper maker does is it creates realistic paper cutout effects by layering on top of paper textures that we have created for you. And afterwards, we just apply style for each of the layers to create that realistic paper artwork. This video will cover some of the tips and techniques to create these paper illustrations. You can access the file after purchasing through 3 different places. There's a download link immediately after you made your purchase. A separate email will be sent to you directly with the download link. And lastly, you can always find the download link in your order account page. After you have downloaded the files, you will see 2 assets that we have provided for you. One is our user license agreement and the other one is just the product itself. Now the product comes in a zip folder, but it's really simple. All you have to do is open it up and then unzip the file to anywhere you like on your computer. Now, opening up Photoshop, the first thing we will do is create a new document. You can do this by going over to the top left corner, clicking Files, and clicking New. And the document size we will be working with is 6000 times 4000 pixels. The orientation set as landscape and everything else set as default. The first thing we'll do is make our workflow much more efficient, and to do this you want to make sure the libraries tab on the right is appearing. If you don't see the libraries tab, you can go over to the top of the windows and at the drop down make sure the libraries is checked. Okay, and the next thing is we'll open back up the product folder, and we wanted to make sure we drag all 40 of the paper color textures into the library. Afterwards, we want to select all 40 of the papers and create a new group for the folder, and we'll give it the name Paper Maker. Now, since I already have a Paper Maker group, I'll name mine Paper Maker 2. Now, when it comes to the workflow, the idea is to be able to drag any of the selection textures right out of the group library, and you don't have to access your product files anymore. So, we wanted to drag the black into our canvas. Let's go ahead and click and drag. And then we'll be doing the same thing for blue. And by pressing V, we can click on the layer, and pressing Ctrl T on our keyboard, we can resize it to fit our canvas. Okay, we'll be doing the same thing for black. Okay, and the next thing to do is I like to press mask on the bottom right and press Ctrl I on the keyboard to invert the mask so that it hides the layer. And we'll be doing the same thing for the blue as well. And since we'll be doing this process a lot, I actually assigned a keyboard shortcut to do this process to make this workflow much more efficient. And to do this, you want to click Edit on the top right, click Keyboard Shortcuts, and with the keyboards panel open, you can click Layer and go all the way down until you see Layer Mask. And under Layer Mask, there's Hide All, and you can see my shortcut key right here, which is Ctrl-Shift-M. You can just go ahead and click and assign any key you want, and in this case mine is Ctrl-Shift-M, press Accept, press OK, and there you have it. Now the next time when you drag a new photo texture into the canvas, and when we resize it to fit the screen, all we needed to do is to press Ctrl-Shift-M on the keyboard, and you will create the mask automatically and hide that selection for us. It makes our workflow extremely easy and quick. Now, when it comes to creating the paper cutout shapes, the tool that I prefer to use is the lasso tool. You can press the lasso tool by going into the left corner and clicking on it, or you can press L on your keyboard to pull up the lasso tool. With the lasso tool selected, go ahead and left click, and holding onto left click, you can draw any of the shape you like in any direction. Once you have made your selection, you can press backspace on your keyboard to make the shape appear. If your shape is not appearing for any reason after pressing backspace, just make sure the left hand panel you have black set as your foreground color. To alternate in between the colors, you can press this little icon right here to alternate between white and black, or you can press X on your keyboard to alternate in between. Having white selected as your foreground and pressing backspace with the selection will make your shape disappear. And pressing X on your keyboard and having black as your foreground color pressing backspace will make the shape appear. For any reason your foreground colors are not set to black and white, you can reset it by pressing this icon right here. Okay, now that we have gotten the basics out of the way, I wanted to create a quick illustration to show you more about my workflow. And the first thing I wanted to do is set black as my background color. So I'll be dragging this right below and pressing backspace on it to remove the mask. And I'll be pressing backspace on this as well and pressing Ctrl+Shift+M to create a mask and hide the selection so it prepares me to create an entirely new shape. For the shape I wanted to create, I'll be pressing L to pull up the lasso tool, and I'll be left clicking and then just drawing a little bit of a wave. Pressing backspace once more to create the shape, and as you can see, we got a wave shape right underneath here. We can go ahead and double click on this layer to pull up the layer style. Now when it comes to making realistic paper cutout effects, the most important layer style that we could have is the drop shadow. If you don't see your drop shadow, you can go ahead and click the FX icon at the bottom and press drop shadow to have it pull up. You can have multiple drop shadows, but in this case, to make it simple, we will only be working with one drop shadow layer. Now when it comes to the drop shadow, there are many sliders to work with, and on the right hand side is the preview of what the drop shadow will look like on your layer subject. By tweaking these sliders, you can make the shadow more dark or less dark depending on the opacity and the distance depending on how far you wanted the shadow to be. Generally, I like to set the spread to 0, and when it comes to the size, I want it to be a little bit wider so that you can see the shadows appear from above. Right now the angle is currently set at 90 degrees, meaning it's being lit from the top all the way down, and we want to check global lighting so that the lighting are consistent between all the layers and all the shapes. When it comes to drop shadow and the sliders, it really depends on the setting of your illustration. You want to make sure to experiment with the sliders as much as you can, and just to get an overall feel of what each of them do. It's really simple. Most of the time you will be working with size and distance as well as the opacity to ensure the shadows are properly fit for their situation. And once you got the shadow you wanted, you can just press OK to exit out of the effect panel. The illustration that I am going for right now is a ship in the sea. So the next thing we wanted to make is the shape of the ship. I wanted to have the shape of the ship be the color white. So I'll be dragging paper 3, which is white, into the canvas and making it fit to screen. Okay, and once again I'll be pressing Ctrl+Shift+M to remove the selection and pressing the keyboard shortcut L to pull up the lasso tool and draw the shape of the ship. Okay, and pressing backspace and having black as the foreground color makes the shape appear, and pressing Ctrl D on my keyboard deselects the selection. We wanted to have the ship body be underneath the wave, so I'll be dragging this layer right underneath it. Okay, and let me just adjust this slightly and double clicking on the effects panel once more to create a drop shadow. Don't worry if the drop shadow doesn't look right, because we can tweak it afterwards since this is a smart object. Anytime we want to tweak the drop shadow just a little bit more, you can actually just double click on the drop shadow right here to pull up the layer style panel once more. Right now we'll just leave it as is. It already has a little bit of drop shadow to it, and I think it looks good. And the next thing that we wanted to do is add a little bit more shape to the ship to give it more detail and make it look a bit more fancy. Okay, to do this, we want to first select our third layer and drag it right in between the two. And the second thing we wanted to do is press Alt on the keyboard and left click on the third layer mask and drag it over to the second layer to replace the mask. Click yes, and you can see that our second layer mask is replaced by the third one. Clicking on the second layer mask and pressing L on the keyboard to bring up the lasso tool, draw a selection where you want to remove the shape from. Okay, with our selection made, you want to make sure our foreground color is set to white, and by pressing backspace on our keyboard, we can remove that selection from our second layer. Pressing Ctrl D on our keyboard to deselect, and the next thing we wanted to do is copy that effect from the third one onto our second layer. And to do so, you can press Alt on your keyboard, then left click on the effect, and holding on the left click, you can drag it to our second layer. This way, it duplicates the effect from the third layer into our second layer, and as you can see, there are a little bit of shadow on our second layer, which creates depth. Okay, the next thing we wanted to do is actually add a little bit more shape to the ship, so it actually has like a hanger. And to do so, we want to select our third layer, select the mask, and pressing L once more on the keyboard to bring out the lasso tool. And then once again, we can just draw the shape of the hanger. And make sure our foreground color is set to black, pressing backspace on our keyboard to make the hanger shape appear. Now the height of the hanger looks like it's a bit too long, so I wanted to remove a little bit of the shape at the top. And to do so, we'll just make another selection. And then make sure our foreground color is set to white, and then we can just press backspace once more. Press Ctrl D to deselect, and there you go, we have our hanger for the ship. Okay, the next thing we wanted to do is add a little bit of a cap on top of our hanger to make it look nicer. And to do so, we want to reuse the same color for our second layer. So what you can do here is press Ctrl J on the keyboard to create a copy of the second layer. Remove the current mask, and pressing Ctrl Shift M to create an entirely new mask. Press L on the keyboard to bring up lasso tool and to just draw the cap shape of the hanger. Okay, now that we have the cap of the hanger created, all there is left is create the little details such as the windows of the ship. And to do so, the color I wanted to use is black. So we'll be dragging this directly into the canvas and just enlarge the image just large enough to cover the area that I wanted to draw in. And we'll do the same thing, Ctrl Shift M, create the mask and hide the selection, and drag this all the way down just right above the body of the ship. Okay, with our lasso tool selected, we'll draw out the shape of the window. And then we will press Alt once again and drag the effect on top of this one to create the shadow. And since our shadow is a bit too much, we can double click on the drop shadow and reduce the size just a little bit more so that it looks more realistic. Okay, by pressing OK and zooming out, you can see that we have created 3 little windows for the ship. That's pretty much it when it comes to creating these paper-like illustrations. The reason why I decided to use the lasso tool is because it allows you to create these uneven lines that look as if they're cut out by using a scissor. And here are some other illustrations that I have done using these paper textures. This one was actually the first illustration I made using the paper maker. And here are other illustrations that I have done for Studio Vision. And this one here is our landing page illustration for our website. As you can see, these are made out of these different paper layer effects. Each one are made up of different layers, and if you press Alt and left clicking on the mask, you can see the shape that I have drawn for this layer. And this is the other illustration that we made for the website. As you can see, there are a lot of layers that was made up to create something like this. And yeah, that's all there is when it comes to the paper maker. It's a really simple workflow that allows you to create these amazing paper cutout illustrations. And if you like what I have shown you, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment down below. This is Leon from Studio Vision, and I'll see you guys in the next video.